am live. I'm also at the last chapter of A Lot to Remember, a book about this part of France Joan Marshall Grant loved and travelled. This was published in 1962. Joan passed away in 1989. She was a fascinating writer, woman. We are continuing here in chapter 28, which, as I said, is the last chapter, a feast of fishes. Except for a beneficent thunderstorm, which broke with such torrential force as we reached Grand Vabre that it was impossible to see through the windscreen. Denys and I would have gone on to Conquest for the night instead of stopping at the Gorge du Dordogne. As though the storm had not already been providential enough, it is providing us with a warm welcome and a dinner, which included a pois aux olives so excellent that I was taught how to make it the following morning. It had a far greater marvel in store. We were drinking our coffee and darkness had fallen behind the steel rods of rain, when suddenly the dining room was flooded with a scarlet glow. Our hostess came running from the kitchen, thinking the house was on fire, and the only other female guest flung her arms around the stranger at the next table and implored him to comfort her during the last hour of the world. Leaving him to this apparently congenial task, we went outside to find the sky bright as noonday, but a brilliant glowing rose instead of blue. Yet it shed no light on the crags, sharply silhouetted as though carved from black basalt. The rain had ceased, and only the metallic notes of drops still falling from the stone roof plucked the profound silence. Then a double rainbow spanned the gorge, its radiance undimmed until abruptly, as though a celestial stage hand had turned the master switch, the scene vanished. After this glory, even the treasure of conquest seemed somewhat of an anticlimax, although the gold jewel-encrusted statue of Sainte Foy, made in 985 as a new reliquary for her bones, which are now behind the abbey's high altar, has a brooding, frustrated power, which chills the spine, even though the idol states from its bed-sized golden throne through a flood-lit glass case, which dominates the museum in the cloisters. Usually one can enjoy the treasure in peace, as I have done on my previous visits, but we were unlucky enough to be seized upon by one of the lay brothers who act as guides, a German, who refused to reply to Denys in that language and instead gabbled incomprehensible English, further obscured by a glutinous Irish brogue. I still do not know whether the phrase which punctuated his diatribe was the holy fate or fete or faith, but it was still pounding against our eardrums as we escaped into the sunlight. Having already discovered that the Lot gorges were being devastated by bulldozers, and not wishing to revisit Estaing or Espalion, we left Conquest by the D42, and for the next 72 kilometers of our homeward journey continued parallel to the river by the D20 and the N88, rejoining it at Saint-Genis-d'Olt. Alt is the Celtic form of Lot, which the people of Saint-Genis retain as a reminder that they stem from the pre-Roman stock, and its chief claim to fame is the Fête de Fraises, which takes place in June at the height of the strawberry season. The N83 is soon following the river below the desolate Cos de Sauveterre, which, like the countryside on the north bank, was deforested 200 years ago to rid it of wolves. Wolves had preyed on the sparse population for centuries before, in 1765, one of them devoured so many scores of women and children that the people decided it must be a werewolf and appealed to the king for protection. The finest marksman in France had at last managed to shoot the beast of a Gévaudan with a silver bullet, and by royal command the body was taken to Versailles, where Louis declared himself astonished that it looked no different to that of an ordinary wolf. This was naive of him, for he should have known that when a warlock dominates his familiar by remote control, he produces no physical change in the animal, although by acting on its psyche he can intensify its natural instincts or even radically alter its behavior. A misuse and extension of the same faculty possessed by people who have an uncanny knack with animals, exemplified in the jealously guarded Irish secret of the horseman's word. If the warlock is activating the link with his familiar, when the animal is killed, an echo wound not infrequently appears in the human partner of this unsavory alliance. Another hazard for the warlock is that he is likely to get entrapped by his own black magic, and so cannot avoid assuming the guise of his familiar when he becomes a ghost. While I was in County Wexford, I heard from several sincere and sober sources, of whom two were hard-riding Catholics, of a silver bullet being used to prevent their recently deceased M.F.H. from continuing to hunt his hounds on moonlit nights. This had become a serious problem, for the sound of his horn disturbed the sheep of his erstwhile companions, and far worse, in the morning their horses were found lathered in sweat, apparently galloped to a standstill and too exhausted to leave the stables. Fortunately, the local curé was himself a keen horseman, and having failed to abate the nuisance by more orthodox means, he melted down 6 Georgian teaspoons and moulded them into a silver bullet for a .22 rifle. Thus armed, on the next full moon, he waylaid the phantom hunt, and although he could only hear the horn and the belling of the pack, his aim must have been accurate, for master and hounds departed to happier hunting fields. It seemed probable that at least one modern French sculptor also believes in werewolves. So horrific is the statue of the beast of Gévaudan at Marvejols, a bastide with 3 fortified gates in the mountains 9 kilometers north of the river. Still further upstream at Basièges, we had turned south the previous year to explore the country of the Tarn Gorges. This is dramatic, but malevolent, especially the savage Course Noire in the vicinity of Montpellier-de-Vieux, where the rock formations resemble Dracula's castle, in which vampires would undoubtedly lurk in the bed curtains and were-mastiffs prowl the corridors further to discourage guests. We went to the cathedral at Mende, but having neither heard nor seen the bells, except a cracked one on the floor at the end of the nave, I was surprised to read later that they are included in the 4 marvels of the Midi, the other 3 being the bell tower of Rodez, the cathedral of Albi, and the abbey of Conques. I am uncertain whether it is before or after the N88 to follow the left bank of the Lot to Bannons-de-Bain that there is laburnum instead of the ubiquitous acacia among the pine woods, but I shall always remember the clarion of their strident yellow pendants among the sombre trunks. Beyond Banons de Bain, a little spa whose medicinal springs were the considered restoratives by the Romans, the road goes through a tunnel under the great castle of Tournelle, a reign splendidly evocative of bold barons. Then a stony track turns off the main road to end at the hamlet of Bonnet in the Montagne du Goulet, close to the source, or over 400 feet of the Lot. We were tired when we got there, but the strong sunlight, the clean wind surging over the savannes, the huge horizons poured energy into us, and by the time we had returned to the N88 and were following it beside the Chapteau, Denys decided he wanted to ensure trout for dinner before arriving at the Hôtel du Commerce, where we had stopped for lunch at Oro on our way to the Tarn Gorges, and being so oppressed by the virtues of Madame Bernard's cooking that we lingered for a blissful week. I had watched Denys cast many flies on the Chapteau, which pours through wooded defiles, turbulent as a highland river on its steep descent to join the Allier, and there were occasions when even the pleasure of collecting flowers and fungi or the sound and sight of waterfalls failed to distract my attention from the fact that I was ankle deep in a chilly marsh. But on the evening I had the grace of unalloyed affection. "Please let him have trout for his supper," I said urgently to the invisible. "2 large ones or 4 small, whichever you find the more convenient." The response was immediate and unequivocal. "He shall have fish." So I was dismayed and bewildered when, after about an hour, Denys put up his rod, saying he had not even seen a rise, much less had a nibble. Even a tumultuous welcome from Madame Bernard failed to dispel my profound disquiet. Undoubtedly, we would have a splendid dinner, including her succulence of pigeons, but she too had to apologize for the absence of trout. Diminished, I unpacked all we should need until tomorrow, when 211 kilometers from Le Puy and Montefaucon would bring us to Lyon in plenty of time to catch the car sleeper express. The bedroom was unaltered. Even the string I had put up to hold Denys' ties was still attached to the wardrobe door, but it was no longer scented by the narcissus we used to gather in armfuls from their drifts, which in the distance looked as though the snow still lingered on the mountain slopes. We were fortifying ourselves with cognac and Perrier before dinner, and I was trying to assure myself that somehow I should contrive not to falter, even though a hunch had proved ephemeral as material possessions, when Madame Bernard came running to show us 4 fat trout, their scales bright as raindrops in their cradle of grass. "A gypsy brought them for you," she said, "a child." And he vanished before I could even give him any money. Yeah, here's the end of this wonderful book. Looking forward to the next one. Have a lovely Sunday. It's the 1st of December.